We are screening the CBSN film Speaking Frankly, Child Marriage tonight, and we'll follow with a Q&A session with Genevieve Meyer and Naila Amin. My name is Autumn Biggie. I'm a Critical Thinking Unit Fellow for the Ayaan Hirsi Ali Foundation, as well as an NC State student. And I would also like to thank the Feminist Collective, Period at NC State, and the International Justice Mission at NC State for helping us to host this event. And also, I want to thank everyone in the audience. We need more traction in the U.S. with this issue, especially in North Carolina. North Carolina is the state with the 4th highest number of child marriages between the years of 2000 and 2015. And the way to change that figure is for we as citizens to inform ourselves and come together to make that change. So to give you a rundown of what's going to happen tonight, we're first going to view the film, and then I will formally introduce our speakers and kick off the Q&A session. Now, with the Q&A session, please remember to post your questions in the Q&A box, not in the Zoom chat. And then I'll use the last 5 minutes to tell you how you can make a difference to end child marriage in North Carolina and the US. So without further ado, I will share my screen and we can watch the film. But yeah, welcome back. Now I'm going to formally introduce our speakers, Genevieve Meyer and Naila Amin, and then we'll get started with the Q&A. You can, if you have questions, you can go ahead and post those in the Q&A box, and we will get to those shortly. So Genevieve Meyer was forced to marry her 43-year-old perpetrator at the age of 15. With only a 6th grade education and no support, Genevieve struggled to leave the marriage, protect her child, and build a life. Now, Genevieve speaks out about overcoming trauma and building resilience. She also educates and advocates on the harmful effects of child marriage and works to help individuals of human trafficking go from victims to survivors. She has been interviewed about child marriage by NBC News, Red Table Talk, and CBSN, among other outlets. Genevieve Meyer is a co-founder of the Resiliency Foundation, peer coach and committee member of the Indiana Coalition to End Sexual Assault, Indiana Protection for Abused and Trafficked Victims Task Force, Anti-Trafficking Network of Northern Indiana, and the National Coalition to End Child Marriage. Genevieve was successful in advocating to raise the minimum age to marry in her home state of Indiana in 2020, protecting future children from suffering what she experienced. Genevieve holds an MBA, HSBCP, and a Bachelor of Sciences in Human Services from Purdue University, an International Relations degree from Indiana University, and a master's degree from Western Governors University. Naila Amin is a 30-year-old student and activist who was born in Pakistan and migrated from there at the age of 4. She found herself engaged at the age of 8 to her first cousin, who is 13 years older. Taken from New York to Pakistan and forced to live with her much older cousin and husband, she was held against her will in Pakistan until the U.S. Embassy intervened and the U.S. State Department rescued her in early 2005. Naila holds a degree in Human Services and is currently working on her bachelor's. She founded the Naila Amin Foundation at the age of 26, and she plans on opening up the first shelter in the U.S. to house girls escaping forced marriages and honor-based violence. She helps many young women by advising them and connecting them with the appropriate resources and legal services. She had a major influence in helping and campaigning for New Jersey to end child marriage. She is also working on some federal legislation to help close the loopholes in the American immigration system that currently put children at risk. In February of 2019, Naila started working with Assemblyman Philip Ramos from Brentwood, New York, to support the Bright Line bill, raising the minimum age of marriage to 18 with no exceptions. Naila is looking to make New York State a child-safe zone in the very near future. So those are our speakers for tonight. And I will start off the Q&A with the question, a common belief about child marriage in the U.S. is that many of the cases are Romeo and Juliet situations, that is, 2 minors entering into a marriage together. Was that your experience, or do you know any survivors who have had that experience?
Are you talking to me or Genevieve?
Either one who wants to start.
I guess I'll start off since I'm the big mouth here. I'm Naila for everyone who's watching. Thank you for being with us tonight. Watching that again or hearing it, it's it's always that wound is always there and it always stuns me for a second. So I have to like kind of come back to reality. But no, my situation was definitely not Romeo and Juliet. I was only 8 years old playing with goats and cows, and they were behind my back, arranging my marriage. So that was definitely not the situation here.
Hey, that was definitely not the situation for me either. I also I've come across people that married as teenagers, but it would have been like the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, quite a while ago. And even the people that are part of those unions have said that in today's age, or given what they know now, even though they had successful marriages, they don't recommend it. They don't feel like it's a healthy thing. And I have never met any like recently married teens that have been happily ever after.
Okay. Then next question, what loopholes in state or federal law allowed you to become a victim of child marriage?
Well, up until 2017, I, along with a few other organizations, wanted New York to become a 18 with no exception state, but we had a lot of pushback from the a bunch of different communities upstate, and they didn't make it 18. So in 2017, the minimum marriage age was raised from 14 to 17. So what failed me is that it was 2004 when the first petition for USCIS was approved for me to bring over my 26-year-old husband. So at that time, the loophole that failed me was the age 14 with parental permission, because my parents were in on this. So that's what failed me, and the loophole in USCIS, the fact that some officer sat there and looked at the age and said, 13, 26-year-old stamp approved. Like, how does that make sense? Red flags should have been definitely, like, come on.
Right. Genevieve?
So in my experience personally, across the US, there's a common misconception that you have to be 18 to get married. And in most states, that's the case, but then you bring in the exceptions. And that age starts whittling down to where you have some states that don't even have an age for, and it's not uniform across the nation. Every state is different. And so you have, very determined parties that will cross state lines and they'll state shop to get it done. So just not having it be like a solid line across the U.S. Still leaves pitfalls and loopholes. And then now children are being drugged across state lines, and making it just even more dangerous, even to start off with. And then nowadays, what I've seen in some young ladies that have reached out to the foundation for help is, again, crossing state lines. We're currently looking at now with COVID, you're able to get a marriage license online, which states are doing that, what are they doing to view that? And then also like the Department of Children's Services, it's so, you can get married so quickly and it's done. And you can go from, being an 8th grader to, there was a case of a young lady, I believe, in North Carolina that was literally like brought off the bus from school of like, hey, you're going to get married today. So, I mean, one day, you're in 8th grade and you're, dreaming of the boy down the hall and at school and your, your 8th grade dance. And then the next day you're married to, whoever. And I have another one of the survivors that testified with me down in Indianapolis. She was 14 and he was 18. So, they're still technically teenagers. But he had the benefit of graduating from high school. He had a job, he had a place, she had nothing. So it's an automatic power imbalance there, even with an only 4-year age difference. And he actually ended up spending several months of the first year of their marriage in jail because he was prosecuted for having sex with another 14-year-old girl that was in her class. So her parents made her marry this guy, and she was trapped in that. Meanwhile, the other girl's parents decided to prosecute it. So I mean, it doesn't match up with the statutory rape laws. It doesn't match up with laws of consent in most states. Nothing matches up, and girls just, fall through the cracks.
Genevieve, I know with your story, part of your story is you crossing state lines in order to get married. So based on your experience, what is the importance of all states banning child marriage?
Well, when you have different states with different statutes, you have state shopping and venue shopping. And then you have states that become destination states, because eventually, people are going to kind of figure out this is where you can go. This is how you can evade the loopholes. And then also, like in my case, I thought about running the entire time. So California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, that's 4 or 5 states there to get to Mississippi. And the entire time I thought about, walking into a gas station and walking about the back door and just running. Now that I'm older and kind of know what the world looks like a little better and, operate in the human trafficking realm, I mean, who knows what could have happened to me. And, a lot of girls, they know they're in this situation, they're state shopping, they're moving across state lines. And so that just furthers the risk of even more disastrous effects of this.
Right. So can both of you talk a little more about the details of when and how you were able to end your marriage?
So with my case, it was 2005 and I was stuck in Pakistan. My parents left me with him. I had nobody. It was just me and him and his family. He took my passport, he took everything. And luckily for me, my mother's cousin, my uncle, he reached out to Child Protective Services, because in my case, right before I was married, I was placed into foster care at the age of 14 for abuse and neglect. My father was very abusive physically, and I was removed from the home. And in that meantime, I had run away back to my family home. And my parents were like, hey, Naila, why don't you go to Pakistan and we'll keep you there till you're 18 and then you'll be safe and we'll bring you back. Little did I know that was a marriage trap. So because I was a ward of the state, that is what saved my life when my uncle called Child Protective Services and said, you need to come get this girl. And then because I was an American citizen, even though I wasn't born in America, I became a naturalized citizen at the age of 7. The U.S. State Department sent people over from the U.S. Embassy to my little village, and everyone in the little village was talking like, oh my God, there's white people in our town. It's a little horse and buggy type of village. And my mother-in-law called me. We were at his aunt's house, and she called me and she goes, there's some people here from the consulate to speak to you. And my ex-husband was sitting with me in the room, and I was trying to signal to this woman. I was like, help me. And she told him, oh, can you get me a glass of water? So he left the room, and I told her, oh, he beat me up last night. He raped me. And she said, I can't help you because you're married under Sharia law in Pakistan. So you need to either get to the U.S. Embassy, or we're going to have to let the U.S. State Department in America do what they have to do. And you have to be really patient with me. But I can't help you right now. So that, to me, as a 15-year-old child, I was so scared, but I knew at least something was happening in the background. So I didn't hear anything for a month or two. And then I got that phone call. My dad called, and he's speaking to my ex-husband, and he said to him, oh, because my ex-husband was my first cousin, he said to my ex-husband, your aunt's in jail because Naila's not attending school. He didn't tell him the whole foster care and neglect stuff. He just, lied and said, because I wasn't attending school, it's an American law, I have to come back. And they arrested my mother here, detained her till they saw proof of a ticket. And on March 5th, 2005, I landed back at JFK, and I remember the plane door opened, and it was about 25 people, and they came to get me, and I spent the first night in the psychiatric ward. But that place was like heaven compared to sleeping with your rapist. And the next morning I went into another group home, and from there on, I had a baby, and I became an EMT, went to college, suffered a lot. I'm still suffering, but you get on and you go through it. I'm 31 years old in a few days and still suffer. The wounds are always going to be there. So I got out with the help of the State Department. But how many more Nailas are there that we can't help out? I have a girl stuck in Ethiopia that no one can do anything right now. So this is happening everywhere. These girls are slipping through the cracks.
Wow.
I was fortunate, but how many girls are not fortunate enough to get State Department on their side,
Right. So what would you say that like what laws need to change? What needs to happen to stop that? For that to not be anyone else's story?
I think what really needs to happen is that, like I always say, and like I have said many times to the media, we need to talk about child marriage. We need to, when I speak to people or Uber, I'm a very people's person. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I love talking about the work that I do. And so when I speak to Uber drivers or just local people, they're shocked to hear that this is an American. They're like, problem. They're like, oh, Africa, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan. No, honey, this is happening right here. You're looking at a survivor. And then I have to literally tell them, which sounds so like conceited, hey, Google my name, but I don't mean it like that. You know what I mean? But just to prove to them that this is very real. I'm standing right in front of you. So I think we really need to just talk to anyone that's listening, even if it's your dog or cat. Call your local politician, research whatever state you're in, research what is my state marriage laws, find out, write to your local legislators, look out for organizations, volunteer your time, speak out, speak up about it, and get involved, and we can all together fight it. But I alone cannot do it. We have to come together. Speak is all I can say. Education.
Definitely. Genevieve, would you like to share about how you were able to end your marriage?
Sure. So a few months after I turned 18, I fled to the other side of the country and tried to put that behind me and move on. Unfortunately, I struggled only having a sixth grade education and absolutely no resources. I struggled to maintain housing, employment, adequate food, and just continued to struggle. And I got to the point where I just felt so desperate that I felt like I wouldn't be able to make it. And so I ultimately ended up going back to my perpetrator. And I also, in that process, discovered that I was pregnant. The child wasn't his child. He knew it wasn't his child. We had kind of an agreement. He said, I guess what happened was bad, and I really didn't help you, and just give me this opportunity to help you and your child get on your feet. Like, we don't have to be married, all of that. So I'm like, well, I don't have that many options. So, I'll go there. And fortunately, I was able to get on my feet pretty quickly. I wasn't really specifically petitioning divorce because originally when I tried to, it was hire a lawyer. Well, I definitely don't have the resources to do that. It was there was residency requirements, and since I was having housing issues, I didn't meet the residency requirement. Just so many obstacles. I mean, it was so much easier to get married than it was to get unmarried, and definitely a whole lot cheaper. And so, I mean, I wasn't planning on remarrying anytime soon, and I was just focusing on getting myself together. I didn't know if I was going to keep the child that I was carrying, what that looked like, but I ultimately decided to keep her very, very late in the pregnancy, and I'm glad I did. But I was just really focused on bringing this child into the world and being what she needed me to be, rather than getting divorced. And so about 2 years went by, and pretty uneventful for the most part. I was able to establish my independence and get established and took care of my daughter and kind of fell into a routine and a life. And then when I did file for divorce, actually he filed for divorce, thank you. But then, surprise, he petitioned for custody of my child. And originally I was like, well, it's not even his kid. This isn't even an issue. I didn't take it that seriously. But he really did. And so I, filed against him having custody of her, and then he responded, and then that's when it just really all came out and stacked against me in court. So I had struggled with symptoms of PTSD. I struggled with anxiety, with depression, after just having an entire life of trauma. I mean, my life has been trauma since I was born. I don't remember a time when I've not suffered from sexual abuse or physical abuse or whatnot at that point. And so, all that came out, and he seemed like he presented himself as this established adult and just ultimately like my savior, who was willing to, take this child that wasn't even his. And, I presented evidence of, the lease of the apartment that I rented for myself and my child. Only my name was on it. I had the job, and I had, health insurance for myself and my daughter. The courts didn't look at any of that. They just looked at me like I was some teenage mentally ill mother who couldn't provide for myself, let alone my child, and that my daughter would be better off having this other person in my life. And the judge even told me that I should have been more careful about who I married. Thankfully, he didn't get full custody, but he definitely did get visitation. And so the nightmare of being married to him really paled in comparison to spending 18 years trying to protect my child and being terrified the entire time that he would violate her or harm her. To my knowledge, he never did. But by this point, I knew that he had a tendency towards young girls. She's not even his biological child. That was really, really terrifying experience. My daughter's 20 years old today. She's doing great. We've moved on. But it was really, really, really hard.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. We have a couple of questions about how child marriage affects education of minors. So first of all, our first question is, for young women who are child brides, how can they be pulled from school without it being alarming to their school? Is the first question, that they've just they're not enrolled anymore. And also, how does child marriage impact a child's access to education?
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Usually what happens is, when I do trainings or webinars, we usually say, and correct me if I'm wrong, the question is how are these girls being pulled out of school and people not noticing? So what they usually do is, June is called it's the horrible month, because June is when school ends. And that is when most Middle Eastern parents take their kid on that summer vacation that turns into a marriage. So in the UK and in the US, they say usually look for signs. If in the middle of the year they say, oh, we're taking our child out to school, we have something in our country. That's what happened to me when I got married at 13. I missed the whole 8th grade. I skipped 8th grade. I never went to 8th grade. A summer vacation of 7th grade, September, I started the 8th grade, and by the end of September, I was in Pakistan at 13 years old. Parents sign a paper saying we have a wedding to go to, or we have something to do in school. And I think that's a really, really good question, because I think talking to social workers in school and guidance counselors about these things is very important, especially for these overseas marriages, or not even overseas. For example, someone like in Genevieve's case, where she was so young, or in Sherry Johnson's case, if they're married, they're not going to school. I think that should definitely raise a red flag. And I think there should be some kind of protocol in place where the school, maybe the district, checks up on the kid, or every 2 months, or they have to report in, or they have to speak to the child. I think something like that needs to come into play, where the child can be tracked, because school is one of the vital areas where a lot of the kids' information can be found. So I think keeping a track, or having some kind of policy. This is a very good question, because I never thought about this before, but that is a very good way. I think having some kind of tracking, like policy, or something on the parents, getting the State Department involved, you know, police involved, knowing where the kid's going, when will you be back, let me see a ticket back, return ticket back, something, you know, they need to step in more, because more and more girls are being pulled out of school. I mean, in the report alone that was done by Senator Ron Johnson's office between 2007 and 2017, over 8,000 petitions were approved by USCIS of minors bringing in older spouses and older men bringing in younger. A 49-year-old man from Guatemala brought in a girl in 2014 that was only 15 years old as his spouse. So I think we have to really keep a track on these girls that are all of a sudden being taken out of school. So it's not just the girls that are being taken out of school for overseas stuff, but it's also the girls like Genevieve and Sherry Johnson that were taken out of school that are just, boom, taken off the grid. God knows where they are. So I think that schools should come up with some kind of tracking policy.
Sure. So with child marriage, I mean, the laws don't match up. And the mandates, you know, that social service organizations and educational institutes operate within don't line up. So in my case, I was listed as homeschooled, even though I wasn't really schooled. So, you know, I was homeschooled. Nobody had any questions there. So I didn't disappear from school. I know 2 other survivors here in my state. Both of them were forced into marriage due to pregnancy, and they were actually asked to leave school because they were pregnant, and the school did not want pregnant teens. We're a little more progressive these days, but I know, you know, pregnant high school girls still have a lot of shame and stigma. They don't receive the support that they should, regardless if they're married or not. But if they're married, a lot of people, like, it's not that they don't necessarily know, it's just they don't know exactly what to do about it. So educational institutes aren't quite sure what to do about it. You know, Department of Children's Services, it doesn't fall within their mandates, and they struggle to understand what to do with it. And I mean, and that's my biggest argument for raising the minimum age, and we just need to raise it across the country, because, you know, we can just raise the age and then all of these issues just go away, rather than like, okay, we're gonna have the age this, but now we have to, you know, train the DCS providers so they can respond to it, and we have to train law enforcement so they can respond to it, and then we have to, you know, and it just creates more problems and potential loopholes, and where you could just done.
I agree.
So we are coming to the end of our webinar. We have around 5 minutes left. I want to thank our speakers for coming tonight to talk about your experiences and to answer questions. And so everyone you can give a round of applause to our speakers if you can back, or snap, that's right. So if you're wondering how you can be a part of the fight to end child marriage in your area, here are a couple ways you can do that. So I just posted in the chat a link to a change.org petition that I created yesterday. And this petition is to tell NC lawmakers to raise the minimum age of marriage in North Carolina to 18. So you can sign that if you would like to. Also, if you are not a North Carolina resident, but your state needs to raise their minimum age of marriage, you can do the same thing. You can create a petition, contact your legislators, and ask them to raise the minimum age of marriage. And I think most of all, like Naila was saying, talk about it. It's really important to talk about these issues, issues that we care about. So yeah, I will also post the link to the video, the film, if you would like to watch that with the screen on. That is a free video, and I will post the link right now. It should be there now. Okay, well, thank you all for coming out. I hope you have a wonderful night, and thanks again to our panelists.
Thank you so much. And Paul is asking if there's a central resource for statistics. You can, I believe, UNICEF, Unchained at Last, and believe the AHA Foundation. They all have some really good stuff. If you put in child marriage US into google.com, trust me, all the stats are going to come up. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Autumn. Thank you to the AHA Foundation. Thank you to my beautiful friend, Genevieve. Thank you for your strength. And thank you so much, everyone, for tonight.